you've got this terrible combination of a president who just for some reason seems to support the tyrant, and I have some theories as to why, but I may have to wait for the 30-year rule to talk about them.
We can see the shape of the peace deal America wants to force on Ukraine. Russia gets to keep all of its gains from its invasion 3 years ago and the land it took back in 2014. That would include Crimea. Ukraine won't be allowed to protect itself in future by being part of NATO. In return, not much apart from the end of the kind of missile and drone attacks that killed 9 people and injured more than 60 last night in Kyiv. Not surprisingly, President Zelensky is resisting the deal, but Donald Trump says that he needs to get it done. Can supporters of Ukraine do anything to protect the country from Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin working in cahoots? Grant Shapps is a former defence secretary, and he's with us. Morning to you, Grant.
Morning.
How would you describe how do you feel when you hear how Donald Trump is talking about Ukraine?
Sick. It's really disgusting. This is the leader of the free world who is really coming out as nothing more than a swaggering bully and choosing tyranny over democracy and the idea of a free world, which I think should worry us all a huge amount.
Do you think, I mean, you know how politics works better than most people. We had the former Ukrainian ambassador on earlier, and he said this is a 100-day fever. He just wants a win. And if the win comes at the cost of Ukraine, but with a victory of a deal, that's good for him.
Well, look, I just think that in the end, of course, there has to be a peace and there has to be a deal. But when you have the leader of the free world before going into those negotiations, giving up or giving in to all of the requirements of the tyrant who's done the invading, then that is never going to be a free and comfortable peace. And it's incredibly sad to see. But I think blame is actually equally apportioned in the sense that because the Western Europe has been so weak on our own security over the years, so dependent on the US, who after all are a country who are thousands of miles away, they're not even on this continent. We have in the end, when we've come to a president who doesn't really give a damn about it, we've in the end outsourced our own protection, our own security, and so we must take part of the blame for that.
Is there a world in where we can have a NATO without America, in effect, where we can basically say Ukraine fights on until it gets the peace it deserves, but it's not backed up by America, it's backed up by something which looks a bit like NATO, but is the European countries? Is that what we're looking at in the future, sort of an America-less NATO of some sort?
It's quite difficult to shift too quickly, and that is the problem. What we all need to do is spend, another couple of % on our own defence, and then you would be in that position. But that doesn't happen overnight. Procurement chains in defence are lengthy processes, but there are glimmers of things along that line. For example, there's the Joint Expeditionary Force. It's actually led by the UK. There's a dozen countries in it. It tends to be the northern countries and Baltics in Europe. And it tends to be a bit more go-ahead than the rest of NATO. Perhaps over time that group could take on the role. You'd obviously want the European stronger nations in defence, like France, Poland, in that, and Germany now that they've lifted their ban on spending money on defence. But as I say, we've ended up with a position where many presidents have warned that the rest of Europe needs, the rest of NATO needs to step up, and here the UK can at least hold its head a little bit higher. We're the second biggest spender in NATO, outside of the US, the biggest. But the rest of Europe has really been dragging its feet, and we haven't been doing enough either. And so you've got this terrible combination of a president who just for some reason seems to support the tyrant, and I have some theories as to why, but I may have to wait for the 30-year rule to talk about them.
Do you want to offer one now?
Thank you. I think I'll probably resist, but I don't think it's too much of a stretch, and many of your listeners will already know because it's publicly reported that he's had previous both run-ins with Kyiv unrelated to the war, and people may come to their own theories as to why he seemed to be in cahoots with Putin, who after all is a dictator who wants a completely different type of world to the one which has been constructed after the Second World War. Yeah. And the irony of all of this, of course, is the country that singly benefited the most from the post-war settlement has been the United States. Yeah. The country that's benefited most from free trade has been the United States. And the country that's going to suffer most according to the International Monetary Fund, from all of this tariff nonsense is indeed the United States. So this is not in America's interests, and it's certainly not in Europe's, and certainly not in ours. As I say, we have to step up to the plate and make sure that we're spending on our own defense. Otherwise, we really don't have much room to complain.
Is Trump right that Ukraine has to concede Crimea?
I don't think so. Crimea is taken just because it was taken 11 years ago doesn't mean it's any more right to walk into a democratic country and take it. Now, if in the end Zelensky and Ukraine thought that that was worth the price of peace, then that's a question for them. But this whole idea that in public, the president of the United States of America, the home of the free, defender of freedom and liberty, bullies a democratic leader into accepting an unjust peace, I find completely revolting.
What do you make of Trump there? Is that your feelings of Trump personally? Is it personality politics? Is it about him the person, do you think?
I don't really have sort of strong feelings about him personally. I mean, he is an opportunist. He, has spent his entire career as a sort of swaggering bully. Anyone who disagrees with him, he shoots down, and then half the time, gets back into bed with them and ends up with them in his cabinet or something. So having slated Trump doesn't seem to be any reason not to be his vice president, for example.
Do you think that
exactly what's happened?
Do you think that should actually encourage British politicians who are serving to be a bit bolder? We had Gareth Davis on for the Tories, and Kate said to him, "What do you make of Ukraine conceding Crimea?" And Gareth Davis, representing the Tory party, wouldn't really say that he said it was a bad thing. He wouldn't say Donald Trump for saying that Ukraine should concede Crimea.
Yes, I mean, look, I'm pretty sure that I speak in the voice of the authentic voice of most British politicians. I happen to have the freedom to be able to say it, not being elected, and being able to say these things. But it is pretty disgusting to see the way that he goes around, treating his own allies, treating his closest allies, treating tyrants as if they are his allies. I mean, all of these things are pretty difficult to bear. And just because British politicians find that hard to say for obvious reasons doesn't mean it's nonetheless either true or that they don't actually believe that themselves. I think everybody recognizes that America sadly has gone off on this tangent, but more for us. We should not be relying on somebody else for our own security. We should look after that ourselves and be, friendly and, pleased when we're cooperating. But we should never put ourselves in a position of outsourcing our own security to a country 3,000 miles away.
Grant Shapps, it's good to speak to you, particularly when you are unencumbered by party lines, to say what you actually think. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Grant Shapps, former Defence Secretary.